Welcome back to the And I Hate podcast, a forum to discuss and combat student hate. Today we are here with Marlon Taylor, a member of the Encinitas Union School District Board of Trustees. Marlon believes in fostering a safe, equitable, and inclusive educational space for students and promoting diversity on campuses and in our curriculum. I'm very excited to speak with him today about how students, parents, and educators can build bridges rather than further divides and uplift students of all backgrounds. So, hello, Mr. Taylor. Thank you so much for being with us today. Obviously, I did not do you justice in that short introduction. So, go ahead, give the people a quick introduction. Tell us a little more about yourself and what you do at Encinitas Union School District.
Hello, Michi. Well, first off, thanks for having me, and I am absolutely honored and flattered that you invited me to participate in this. A little bit about myself. Well, I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and realizing that you know, growing up in a family that didn't have a lot, I realized quickly that I wanted to get away from St. Louis as quickly as possible. So I enlisted in the Navy actually at the end of my junior year in high school in what was called the delayed entry program. So during my senior year, every few weeks I would go and do drills with the Navy recruiters in the St. Louis area. 2 weeks after graduation, I went to boot camp. And my plan was to do 4 years in the Navy, and turned out I did 20 years.
Oh my.
Um, it was a great run. I spent time in Japan, Scotland, Canada, and deployed on ships all over the world. I rode ships for about 10 years. I served as an instructor. So I got to do some really cool things in the Navy. And when I got out of the Navy, I worked as a consultant for a firm for a year, hated every day of it. I thought I wanted to be a suit and tie guy. Turned out I did not want to do that. And at the time, my second daughter had been born, and we were looking for a daycare situation for her. We weren't finding anything that we liked. So my wife said, well, you really haven't had much downtime in the last 20 years. Why don't you hang out with the girls for a few months and see what, you know, we'll revisit the daycare situation at some point. 3 months turned into 7 years. I was at home with the girls as a stay-at-home dad, and it really changed my perspective on a lot of things. Um, the role and the importance of having um, work environments that understand the needs of working moms. Seeing what my wife had to endure as a working mother. Um, the importance of having diverse perspective at diverse perspectives at our schools. Being involved in the PTA up at Flora Vista, I got to see a number of things. I was really involved in our PTA efforts. I was in our kids' classrooms a lot, and you start seeing things, and I became something of a um, I guess a trusted source. Like when things would happen, the principal or some of the teachers would ask me questions, and we talk about possible solutions for these things.
Yeah.
And and that kind of spurred my interest in potentially seeking a position on the school board. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So, going into the school board, what are some of the things that specifically you wanted to change? Whether that was based off of your own experiences, especially with your wife, or just anything else, whether that's from when you were growing up or just what you personally wanted to do.
Yeah. So where I went to school at in St. Louis, well, let me take you back even further.
Hmm.
From kindergarten through third grade, I went to school in a all black community.
Yeah.
It was not a great district. It's still not great today. Um, and Going into fourth grade, I got transferred to a different school district that was 50% black, 50% white. And at first, I was really apprehensive about it. I remember as a young child being really concerned. Can I compete? Do I belong here? All of these things. And by the end of the first semester, I'd started making friends. And by the end of fourth grade, I realized that, we're all kids going through the same thing. We all
Mhm.
have the same dreams. We all have the same goals. We all have the same aspirations. We all have the same struggles and concerns. And so that was like the first thing that broke down a lot of barriers for me. That sense of there's nothing different between me and these other kids.
Yeah.
Then you start building friendships and relationships, and you see what other families that don't look like yours look like and how they operate. And again, I'm like, holy smokes, there's not really much difference between us. And so as I started going through fourth, fifth, sixth grade, you just start seeing more and more of these things, and you realize that there's a lot of opportunity out here. And all I want is an opportunity, a fair shot to succeed. I want,
Yeah.
I want that fair opportunity. That's all I ask for.
Mhm.
And in that school district, it was a lot of our teachers, which is pretty funny, were old hippies, and
Mhm.
a lot of them were civil rights activists.
Yeah.
So when we would talk about Black History Month, we did much more than like the big three. We went deep into Black History Month. When we would talk about the Holocaust, because it was a large Jewish community, we went
Mhm.
deep into the Holocaust. So all of these things that I see school districts such as, San Diego grappling with now with regards to ethnic studies
Yeah.
were things that we leaned into in the 80s.
Mhm.
So it baffles me, it blows my mind that these things are so hard for people to discuss and talk about today. I honestly am very confused as to why these things have become such lightning rods.
Mhm.
History happened. It's okay that history happened.
Yeah.
No one is asking anyone to feel any kind of way about history. And it's one of those things of, you know, here's the information, take from that information what you will. And, hopefully as we, become older, we become a little bit wiser as well.
Mhm.
So some of those things really play a part into the way I look at our district, the way I present myself at EUSD. I was given a gift of having great teachers in St. Louis. I was given the gift of being in a very diverse but very inclusive environment. And
Yeah.
I wanted to be able to share that with this district. My kids have gone through this district, and and there have been things that I saw happen to them that were, I don't want to call like they weren't awful things. They were learning moments. They were teaching moments that, I'm like, if we can do better, let's try to do better. So when I ran for the school board in 2020, my goal was, you know, to bring a diverse perspective, a different voice to the dais. So, the first board meeting, and we're dealing with COVID.
Yeah.
And it was at that moment where I'm like, you know what? I am, I had to lean on my Navy experience. And I'm like, you know what? I pride myself on being a team player. And this is what the team is dealing with right now. We have to figure out a way to get these kids back on campus. We have to figure out a way to make sure that our teachers feel safe about it, that our parents feel safe about it, and that everyone that has any skin in the game feels good about the ways that we need to move forward.
Mhm.
And so that was my introduction to the board. And, from there, after we kind of weathered that, I would then try to find little bits and pieces and ways that I could interject the things that were important to me. But I also didn't want to let my interests override the importance of the things that we needed to do as a board, you know, because again, I'm one, I look at myself as, our board is a body and I am just one appendage on that body. I'm not the whole thing. I'm just one vote. So, it requires figuring out how do we want to move, how do we want to operate, what are we trying to do as a collective to make our district better. And I think that's the beauty of the way we operate is we have all of our bits and pieces that we bring to the table, and we bring those things to the table, and then we try to fit them in the best way we can. And if my part doesn't fit today, that's fine. Maybe it'll fit tomorrow, and I'm okay with that.
Mhm. I really like that mentality when it comes to policy making. I think that this isn't a critique of any individual person
Mhm.
because I think in a lot of situations it's impossible to not let your personal views or ideals, influence how you view a situation. But I think it is really important to adopt this mindset of thinking, oh, I may feel very strongly about this thing, but it can wait. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't need to be shoehorned into whatever's going on right now and to kind of prioritize the broader interests.
Yeah.
Something that you talked about in like your explanations and kind of relating this to the history classes and the wonderful teachers that you had when you were growing up in St. Louis are things like ethnic studies. So, with a lot of the initiatives that you would like to see implemented, maybe even if they're not feasible right now, what kind of pushback do you expect with them, like we've been seeing with ethnic
Yeah.
studies? And how do you think we'll be able to reconcile that?
I think there's going to be a lot of pushback. Well, some of the things I'd say one of the things I'm grappling with right now at EUSD is how do we bring our parents along on the journey that we've been on. We've
Yeah.
done a lot of great work with regards to teaching about equality, getting our teachers ramped up on what it looks like, and how do we do this? Getting our teachers ramped up on creating inclusive environments of all students for all students in our classrooms and on our campuses. And I find the biggest struggle that we have right now is the fight against misinformation. And I'll call it what it is, because that's what it is. It's misinformation that's out there. And so how do we fight against that? And I think the things that we have to do to kind of fight against that is one, listen. What are people saying? You know, what are your concerns? Why do you feel that way about this? Yeah. What would you like to see happen? And that's one of the things that I like to ask people is if you don't like this, then what would you like to see happen? Yeah. If we can agree that we want to have more inclusive environments, what does that look like to you? Um, so really working to find that middle ground because like I was just talking to somebody before this call. EUSD was around before I got on board. And whenever my time on the board ends, the district's going to continue moving on.
Mhm.
I am just here for, I'm just keeping the seat warm for somebody. so, um, I think the biggest pushback is going to be people that don't quite understand what we're trying to do. And the counter to that is really being patient, being understanding, being compassionate about their concerns, while also, being really committed to what we want to try to do. And, convincing people that, you know, to have a conversation about this topic or that topic doesn't take away from anything else. We're adding on to it because the world has changed, the world has evolved, the world has gotten significantly smaller. And my biggest goal for my time on the board is to be able to give kids the tools that they need to, be productive, caring, sympathetic citizens in this world because Once you leave this little bubble of Encinitas, you have no control of who your roommates are going to be in college. You have no control of who your professors are going to be in college. If you go off to work in the real world, you have no control over who your boss is going to be, who your coworkers are going to be. And if you lack that cultural awareness or that cultural understanding, if you don't understand that if I say this, it's going to have this kind of impact on somebody else, you know, I don't know if you're, fully equipped. And
Mhm.
I just don't want to see that happen to any of our kids, not a single one of them.
Yeah. I really like how you frame learning about different stories and cultures and backgrounds in terms of their real utility because it's true. If a student is ignorant about how their words or their actions specifically affect people, that is obviously going to hinder their ability to interact with the world at all.
Yeah.
Like college roommates, future employers, even future partners and friends. So, on even in a current level, how do you think learning about different stories and backgrounds and cultures and even unseen parts of history helps students even as they're going throughout high school and middle school?
I think learning those stories, learning about different cultures, different, people that are different than us, it broadens our horizons, it broadens our worlds. In a community like Encinitas, where, there's a paucity of minorities in this town. So we have to kind of artificially implement some of this stuff. And you do this by implementing it in the curriculum based on the books that we read. There's not a lot of black families in St. Louis. So, bring in more books that highlight the lives of black kids and black students. The
Mhm.
handful of kids that are in our schools, they want to read about people that look like them or that have had a similar lived experience than them. Um, People want to know what it's like to be in a different place in a different time. What was it like during the civil rights movement? What was it like during the gold rush? Give me an unvarnished, honest appraisal of that. What was it like during these different moments? And the way that I was always taught and the way that I view these things are, the more I know about what's happened in the past, or the more I know about another person's journey, that's going to help me. You know,
Mhm.
I have a better understanding of your background, of where you come from, and why you're, doing what you're doing. So I know how best I can be of service to you, how I can help you. I have an understanding of what's happened in the past. So I know what I would like to see happen in the future so we can avoid the mistakes of the past. And
Definitely.
I think it's possible to learn those things without compromising anyone's personal beliefs,
Mhm.
without making anyone feel bad about anything. I'm like, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of, hard truths that happened in history.
Yeah.
And we can't shy away from those things. It happened. Those
Mhm.
things happen. So now let's study why it happened. What were the catalysts for those things to happen? What could have been done differently? And and I think those things set us up for a better future. And you know, I don't know. Again, like I said, the whole, well, it makes me feel bad. I don't understand that. That's foreign to me
Oh,
because
yeah.
I really don't get it. I
Mhm.
honestly don't get it. Why do you feel bad about something that happened 200 years ago? It happened.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah,
Exactly.
I don't.
And the thing is, it's kind of ironic because if you feel bad about something happening, if you harbor some kind of guilt for that thing happening, the most logical thing is to learn about it and its causes so that it doesn't happen again, so that you don't feel
Exactly.
a more immediate sense of guilt about some awful atrocity that's going on right now that could have
Yeah,
been prevented.
yeah.
Mhm.
Instead, some people are kind of leaning into it and doubling down,
Yeah,
which is it's bizarre to me. I
it's quite frustrating, yeah.
I'll listen to some meetings or sit in on some things, and I'll leave with more questions than I came in with some of
Oh,
the
no.
it's hard.
Mhm. Yeah. So, given all of the pushback and, including these ideas of, I don't want to hear about this or this stuff makes me feel bad, how can we achieve that diversity in our curriculum and have students learning about these different historical events and people and stories and the whys behind conflicts, even without a special class or curriculum?
I again, it goes back to books. I think there are ways that, you know, let teachers teach. Let teachers do what they do best.
Hmm.
As a school board trustee that's not a professional educator, I know that our superintendent, our executive cabinet, our teachers have, know more about education than I do. And I am 1,000% okay with that. I'm comfortable in my skin. I am good with that. Let the professionals do what they do best. And I think if you let teachers teach from the heart, teach in a place where they don't have to worry about being concerned about, you know, backlash or somebody getting upset that they had the audacity to talk about the Holocaust or talk about, the rise of Adolf Hitler, you're going to get a better product. You're going to get a well-rounded student that understands these things. So there are ways that it can be done. In our district, the K through 6 district, we're scratching the surface on some of these things. But there are ways using math word problems where you can talk about different scenarios while teaching multiple things, bringing in, there are ways you can be creative.
Oh, yeah, definitely. My teachers are actually really good with this. I've loved being in all of their classes. An example for me that really sticks out is earlier this year, my stats teacher, and stats is one of my favorite classes. She used stats to figure out what certain likelihoods of juries being selected depending on the case
Yeah.
were. And if it was actually, fair or completely random, and how that affects justice and how we perceive different crimes depending on who the defendant is. It was really cool stuff, and I liked how she integrated it.
Yeah.
So, what are some resources outside of school and outside of obviously what teachers would show students that students can look for if they are looking for, this kind of learning experience and this kind of diversity in their curriculum? Obviously, there are like many amazing books. Do you have any specific recommendations?
Ooh, any specific recommendations?
Yeah.
um as for books, there are just so many. It just really depends on, what it is you're trying to, go after or learn in particular. Um, I'd say read a variety of books on the number of different, if there's a topic in particular that you're looking for, be it civil rights or Martin Luther King, read a few different books about that individual or that time period. That way you get a variety of perspectives instead of just getting one perspective. I'd say read, a number of them, and even some that may challenge or push the normal, perceived viewpoints. Um, and I'm also, probably to the detriment of the rest of my family, I am a huge documentary buff. So
Mhm.
I think I've worn out PBS's library of documentaries because I they do such a great job at really telling some of those stories. And one of the documentaries that I tell people about all the time, because for me it was one of those eye openers,
Yeah.
was the Ken Burns documentary about the Vietnam War. And being a child, um, going through, so I started kindergarten. Well, I was in fourth grade in 1982. So we were, that's probably 12, 13 years removed from the end of the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And when we started learning about the Vietnam War, it was, the version that I was taught was significantly different than what I saw in the Ken Burns documentary.
Mhm.
And At first, it was a little bit jarring to me. I felt offended at first. I'm like, can't believe I didn't get the whole story because there were decades of drama that led up to the war.
Yeah.
And, and those things were never really taught in US schools because, we were complicit in some parts of it. Some parts of it, we were the good guys. Some parts of it, we were the bad guys. And then the war happens. And we were all just like, well, the war started and, this is how it ended. But, with everything, there's a beginning. And in that beginning, there were a lot of moving parts and pieces that, there are some things that we could be very proud of. There are some things that, can be not so proud of. And I look at that, I use that documentary a lot as an example because there are things out there. There are documentaries out there that are real eye openers. One that I show with my kids frequently is a documentary goes to in probably sixth or seventh grade. It's a documentary about the civil rights movement called Eyes on the Prize. And it does an amazing job of talking about the entire arc of the civil rights movement from a number of different perspectives, be it the people that were on the ground, the Martin Luther Kings, the Medgar Evers, to the Freedom Riders, all of these different corners and aspects of it. And it's just eye opening. And, so I sit down with my girls and we watch it every few years just so that they get that perspective because unfortunately they don't get that very same perspective in their classrooms today.
All of those are spectacular recommendations. I really like all of those documentaries. I'm pretty sure the Ken Burns, I might just be associating this with Ken Burns because Ken Burns himself is very, very famous. But I'm pretty sure the Vietnam one specifically from him is famous. I've heard about it before. When we learned about the Vietnam War in school, I think that was a recommendation from one of my teachers as well. So I really appreciate all of those. So overall, something that I did want to touch on actually is kind of going back to something that you said earlier about when you were younger and when you were growing up in St. Louis and when you
Mhm.
went to school districts. I really like this idea of belonging. I think that's something that I've heard from a lot of students of color that when they really saw their school and educational experience kick up, it was when they felt like they belonged. And that is even something that my dad experienced when he was growing up in the South and he was basically the only Asian family in his entire area, like a lack of belonging, which tainted his educational
Yeah.
experience. So, overall, how do you think, students, educators, parents, administrators, all of us can work together to foster a sense of belonging for every single student in our districts or in our communities?
Very easy, very simple. Treat people the way that you would like to be treated. Like it's as easy as it is. I am not going to do or say something to somebody that I wouldn't want done or said to me. Um, and if I see somebody that clearly feels uncomfortable in their environment, I am going to do whatever I need to do to make them as comfortable as possible. You know. So some of the time it's engaging, just having a conversation. Um, Creating these spaces where it's okay for people that are of a certain group to kind of, build community amongst themselves and not make it about the larger group. You know, these things are, again, for me, some of these things are just so, you know, easy for me to understand. And, but the frustration is why is it so difficult for others to grasp their minds around it, to create an inclusive environment, to create a sense of belonging. We are all in this thing together. We are all trying to pull in the same direction. So, based on the color of a person's skin, their sexual orientation, their gender, that has nothing to do with anything. you know let's just create an environment where everybody feels safe, where everybody feels as if they can achieve whatever goals it is that they have set for themselves. And, how do we, you know, I don't know. It's extremely frustrating to me at times, that people really struggle so hard with those things.
Yeah.
I hope I answered that question
No, that was a perfect answer. I think that
for you.
the yeah, I think that the simplicity of the answer is actually really good. It's easy to remember and it's something
Yeah,
that we use a lot. I think recently people in general have been getting bogged down with so many little things that don't really matter,
yeah,
and it's precluded us from actually including people and treating people equally and kindly. So I think that that's a really important message that we all need to remember.
yeah. It's I tell people at work all the time, um, because I work in the diversity and inclusion space for a large company here in the area, and and I tell my colleagues that there's a lot that I don't understand, and I'm okay with that.
Mhm,
I don't have to understand everything, but my job as an advisor, my job as a school board trustee is to provide service to people. And, you know, what do I need to do to make sure that you feel as if you belong, to make sure that you have the tools that you need to thrive and survive? What do I need to do? That's the way I look at it. And that's the way I encourage people at, whoever I encounter to look at these things. What can I do to make your presence here, make your time here enjoyable, comfortable,
mhm,
valuable? It's again, because it's not about me. It's about the experience of the whole. And if the experience of the whole is pleasant, then I win.
mhm,
It works out for me.
mhm.
But if there are people that are feeling discomfort, I feel that discomfort. And it's hard.
Definitely, yeah. I really like this emphasis on, like community and what's good for everybody rather than just for yourself. And I really like this approach to, how we treat others and how we evaluate our actions and their impact on people. And it seems so basic, right? This is a
Yeah,
basic or concept. It's just empathy. I feel like we all learned this from a young age, but it's pretty different learning about it and then actually practicing it every single day.
yeah.
So I really appreciate you being here with us today. Thank you so much for your insights on some of the stuff going on at EUSD specifically, but more broadly about how we can treat others and be more inclusive and foster that sense of belonging that helped you so much when you were younger. So thank you
Oh,
so much for being on here.
thanks for having me.